나도만 이제 아주 继续准备 아 주문한 것을 다나시 사람 균이 신진난게
First of all, I would like to extend my warm greetings to all of the nuns at the Spring Teachings and everyone listening over the internet. There are a few days when we were unable to have the teachings. From one thing, I had some sort of a flu, maybe influenza or something, and if I hadn't got over it well, and so before the flu got bad, I felt it was better to rest. Otherwise, it would get worse and worse. It wouldn't be good. So I spent a little while resting. And then also, there was the text for the 5 deity Tara practice, and it took a fair amount of time to write that. And so for a few days, I was unable to give the teachings. Now, I still feel like I'm still not 100% better from the sickness. I'm not, it's a little bit strange, but from today on, we will continue with the teachings. As I said before, I've got the real strong intention to finish the discussion of Mikyo Dorji's autobiographical verses by Mikyo Dorji. Now, the actual main part of the spring teaching ends on the 8th of April, but we will continue after that with the teaching. So we have a new schedule for the teachings that we have been spreading. And so we will continue the teachings until we are completely finished, until we have finished completely with Mikyo Dorji's life story. I think it's possible that we will have changed the times. Right now, it's at 6:30 in the evening in Indian time. But we might change it after the spring teachings are done. We might start at 6 p.m. Indian time. But until we're finished with the spring teachings, we will continue because the dinner is served at 5:30, and otherwise there won't be enough time for everyone to have their supper. So today, within the autobiographical verses Good Deeds, I would like to speak about the 26th, the 27th, and the 28th Good Deeds. Now, if we discuss this according to the outline that the attendant Sanjay Peldra made, so according to this outline, we're in the passage discussing how Mikyo Dorji trained in the precepts of the two types of bodhicitta. And this has we're looking at the passage of the greater individual, and this has 3 sections: the intention arousing bodhicitta, the action meditating on the 2 types of bodhicitta, and how Mikyo Dorji trained in the precepts of the 2 types of bodhicitta. And so we were speaking about the third one, how he trained in the precepts of the 2 types of bodhicitta. Now, this has 7 subdivisions. And among the 7, we are speaking about the first, how he trained in the 6 transcendences. Now, the 6 transcendences, we've discussed the first to the fourth transcendences. And so now we've come to the fifth transcendence, how Mikyo Dorji trained in dhyana. Now, these are the root text for the fifth topic, how he trained in dhyana. I applied antidotes to all the subtle and coarse afflictions, for they are not conducive to inspiring myself to virtue. Beside focusing one pointedly on the cause and results of perfect Buddhahood, how could I think of anything else? I think of this as one of my good deeds. Now, among the 33 good deeds described in the autobiographical verses Good Deeds, this is the 26th. Now, in the collected works of Mikyo Dorji, there is a text called the Instructions on Training in Mikyo Dorji's Liberation Story, and I think I'd like to speak about it before. Now, as I described before, so that means in the previous teachings, in order to abandon what needs to be discarded and develop the antidotes and completely discard the negativities of the obscurations, you have to meditate on patience, right? You also need to be diligent. Now, arousing patience and diligence on their own are not enough. You also need the samadhis and dharanis and the great gates of liberation and so forth that the Buddhas and the great bodhisattvas have in their beings. And also you need to be able to rest in the jhanas, as of the absorption of the jhanas. And you need to have the wisdom that knows all phenomena as they are and as many as there are. Now, what impedes us from developing such qualities, or what are obstacles to achieving those jhanas? There are many different obscurations that prevent us. And in order to eliminate all of them, it's important for us to be able to rest in the equipoise of the luminosity, free of thoughts. And in order to rest in the equipoise on the luminosity, free of thoughts, there are many adverse factors that prevent us from achieving the workability of mind and workability of body. And in order to eliminate all of these obscurations, we need to apply mindfulness, awareness, and carefulness. And we need to make sure that we don't lose the qualities we already have. We need to be able to increase the ones that we haven't yet gained. And so we need to be able to be very diligent about this. So basically, this means we need to be very diligent about our practice of samadhi. So if we discuss this according to how it's described in Sanjay Peldrup's commentary on the meaning, now there are many people who are like this today, and during the time of Mikyo Dorji as well, in all the different countries, including Tibet. A lot of people who claim that they're at a very high level of realization, their mind stream is at a very high level. So there are many people who claim this. And they say they're really extraordinary, and many people began to think of them as like a source of refuge, and they pretend to be able to grant them refuge and protection. So there are many such lamas. However, they say that they have realization. They pretend to have a high level of mind. They have to say that they're the refuge and someone who can protect a lot of people. There are many people who say this, but the root of what produces suffering for ourselves and others, when we look at what that is It is the minds of attachment and aversion. It comes down to whether the afflictions have been pacified or not. If we want to pacify or eliminate the afflictions, what we must do is we must achieve the worldly or super-mundane dhyanas. There's no choice but to achieve the dhyana meditations. We need to recognize them. And in order to achieve those dhyanas, then we need to have the antidotes that discard the lesser, middling, greater antidotes of the afflictions to the lower realms and antidotes. This depends upon the virtue of a workability mind, or shamatha. And so this is something that those people who say that they have high realization don't understand, this really critical point. Not even knowing that hot point, and they still are kind of more audacious and to say, I have achieved the shamatha of the inside of the Buddhas and the greater suttas, and basically saying my realization is greater than the gods. I have the same realization as the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and they say such things as this, and they also say that I'm completely free of the obscurations that impede that. And so there are quite a few people who make a lot of noise saying things like this. So there's many people who you could say they're so, boasting about it, or say that they're being deceitful and saying this. The way Mikkyö Dorje thought about people such about these, he thought that these people who, though they didn't have any realization, pretended they had realized, who hadn't come to a high level of being, but pretended that they had. For him, he felt like that was the most painful thing that he saw. So for people to be charlatans, to pretend to be something they weren't, that was the thing that he found most painful. He didn't like it at all. Now, the reason why he didn't like this, the reason why he's so unhappy about this is something we need to understand, right? Mikkyö Dorje, the reason why he's so unhappy about people who didn't have high realization but pretended they did, who pretended to be something they didn't, is it's not a question of him not liking the people. It's a question of the fact that they acted as such charlatans. The reason why he didn't like this is that the worldly dhanas cannot actually completely eliminate the afflictions, but they can at least pacify the manifest afflictions. And that as long as you have the dhyana, have the realization of dhyana, then the manifest of afflictions of attachment and aversion won't arise, and so it's helpful to that extent. But these people who say they have high realization tend to forget about even super mundane or transcendent jhana. They haven't even developed the worldly jhanas. They aren't even able to pacify the manifest afflictions, but they are kind of audacious enough to say that they have the same level of realization, the same the qualities of absorption that all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas have. And for them to pretend that they have this, it's just absolutely impossible that they could have them. And the reason, if you are unable to block even the manifest afflictions, and because of this, then you're going to accumulate unvirtuous actions. If you can't stop the afflictions, then the afflictions are going to happen no matter when. And if you are unable to suppress them, then you're naturally going to accumulate unvirtuous actions. And that makes it difficult to even achieve the states of gods or humans in the higher realms. And if you're not able to achieve the state of gods or humans in the higher realms, then it's impossible to achieve the dhyanas. In order to achieve the dhyanas, then you need to have the support or the basis for doing this, which means that you need to achieve the state of being a god or human in the higher realms. So if you're unable to even achieve a higher realm birth as a god or human, then it's extremely difficult to achieve the samadhi or the dhyana meditations. So Mikyo Dorje understood this point. In order to pacify the afflictions, even at the very least, the manifest afflictions, if you had the worldly shamatha, the worldly dhyana, achieving that worldly shamatha or worldly dhyana is extremely important. And in order to develop that sort of samadhi, you need to eliminate the adverse factors to it. And you also need to have all of the various causes complete. And so you have to work very hard at this. The primary adverse factor is, if we look at what that is, we say that it comes not seeing the sensory pleasures as faults or problems. That's the main impediment to achieving a shamatha. In order to abandon such faults of attachment and aversion, you need to look at the thoughts of the sensory pleasures being like poison, like an enemy. And you need to be very assiduous about your practice of being free of desire. You need to really work hard at it. And so Mikyo Dorje himself saw that the affliction and the afflictions of attachment and aversion prevented him from achieving that. It was the torpor and excitement and so forth. He applied the antidotes. He used the antidotes such as he used antidotes of mindfulness and awareness and carefulness, conscious, so forth, in order to purify all of the contaminants that made the obscuration that contaminated his mind and made it intractable. So he worked very hard at this. So Mikyo Dorje at all the times, no matter who he was going to see, he always had, very sense of a conscience and a real propriety. But he was very conscious, had a lot of consciousness and propriety. And he always put a stop to thoughts of the 8 concerns and self-interest. And he had like a limit, a board in his head. And he never allowed any thoughts. He had a boundary, and he said that no thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns of self-interest were allowed inside. It's like he's putting a border between himself and thoughts of the 8 concerns and of thoughts of self-interest. And so he had this border between himself and thoughts of the 8 concerns and thoughts of self-interest. And he also worked hard to never fall away from Mahayana thoughts and actions. And Mikyo Dorje himself never had any thought of pride or showing off. He never turned to saying, I'm this great person, I'm a Karmapa, I'm a great being. He never acted as if he was some great or impressive person. Instead, he always associated people who were really softly, who were had little greed or hatred. And so these are the people who he associated, the people who were spent his time with. And he also didn't like ignoring other people. And no matter what he did, he was always very authentic, very genuine in what he did. He never had much pretense. Some people kind of perform when they're in front of other people, but there's none of that with Mikyo Dorje. Likewise, in his own mind, he always maintained mindfulness and awareness. He was very clearly knew what he was doing. So whenever he was doing, he was always embraced with mindfulness and awareness. So he was always able to accomplish what he was working on. And because when he really turned his attention to something and performed some action, he never had any regret about it. It's because if he put his attention to a task, then later, whether the task was finished or not, he never had any regret about that. Because no matter what he's doing, he acted with mindfulness and awareness. And at all times, he spoke to his students about, spoke to them in ways that inspired renunciation, talked about the problems of samsara. He talked about the suffering that beings experience. He praised the qualities of the three jewels. And no matter what he did whatever to make whatever action he or anyone else did, he did what he could to make it a path to liberation. This is like the aspirations and instructions that he gave, the example that he showed. So one of the great examples Mikyo Dorji gave is that he had a really strong bodhicitta, and because whether it's the power of that, or was because of the power of his strong love and compassion, anytime, in any case, whatever it was, no matter how long he spent, whether there's spent with him a few hours, he was never displeased with it. Like with us, if there's someone who comes and spend a few hours, something, sometimes you get a little bit bored, right? You get a little bit displeased and say, yeah, better if you go, I can't stay. Sometimes we have that thought. But when he would go see Mikyo Dorje, because of the power of his bodhicitta, because of the power of his love and compassion, no matter how long you spent in his presence, he never was displeased. Not only was he never displeased, as long as he's there, he was able to stop all afflicted thoughts. During that time, there was like you couldn't have any afflicted thoughts, like they just stopped. And so people had this feeling too. And that's why faith and enthusiasm for virtuous phenomena really increased greatly. Just during the time that you were with him, it was like you're continually feeling faith, you're always feeling enthusiasm for Dharma. This just naturally occurred. And when you would see other people or speak to them, no matter how much you heard them, or no matter, you were never satisfied with him. You could never feel like you'd spent enough time with him. No matter if you spent a long time seeing him and hearing him, you still wanted to see him. You still wanted to hear him. That's the feeling that we have. And so for that reason, whenever you would go to see Mikyo Dorje, you're really delighted and really enthusiastic about it. Really happy, like, I've got it great. I'm so just really happy to go see him. And so you'd be happy and joyous to go see Mikyo Dorje. And then once you left his presence, so you go, oh, I didn't spend enough time. The hours just passed by so quickly. I didn't have time. You really feel like you really missed him already. Like, what's another feature of Mikyo Dorje is like, as it said in the Great Beings of the Past, it says that the focus of Mahayana Jhana is bodhicitta. So what you focus on when you're practicing jhana is bodhicitta, as it said. And just as the Great Beings of the Past had said, when you met Mikyo Dorje, then you feel like he was always completely within bodhicitta. He was never apart from bodhicitta, and he was remaining unwavering from his bodhicitta. This is the feeling that you get when you're with him. However, what it says when in the Buddha's words in the treatise is that when you achieve the jhanas, you can achieve miraculous powers and clairvoyances and so forth. This is what is taught, but Mikyo Dorje never did Mikyo Dorje ever display any such miraculous powers or clairvoyances. What his students, such as Sangye Peldrup and others, would say is that Mikyo Dorje never showed any miracles or clairvoyances that anyone else couldn't do. when you looked at him from the outside, he seemed exactly the same as. He just seemed like some an person who was just on the lesser path of accumulation. Yes, I mean someone who has the bodhicitta. You can tell that he had bodhicitta, but it's not like he didn't have any other great qualities, such as doing miraculous powers or clairvoyances. He didn't ever show anything that would astound or amaze everyone else. We also talk about the supreme human qualities, the things that transcend worldly things, everything's that ever able to do, like doing miraculous things, or being telepathic or so forth. He didn't show any of that. When you talk, he was just like a regular person. The way he did things was just like an ordinary sentient beings. That's what he appeared to me. He didn't seem like someone that was always doing things that people couldn't do, like flying in the sky or burrowing into the earth. He didn't do anything like that. He didn't even pretend to have anything like that. So many people came looking for Mikhe Dorje from all different places, and most of them were seeking the Dharma. And so when they came to see him, sometimes they would ask teachings on Prajnaparamita, or on secret mantra, or on Mahamudra. So there were a lot of people who were seeking the jhanas and so forth. You think about these sutra practices, or in particular the practices of meditation practices of the sutra tradition, and said, "Please give me meditation instructions." And say, "Please give me meditation instructions on Mahamudra." So all these people would come to, "Please teach me Mahamudra. Please teach me the secret mantra, Vajrayana meditation, so forth." And so people come and ask him, but he said, but he would first teach everyone who came to ask the Dharma, even the beginners. He would instruction the fifth instructions for a beginner to enter the dhanas. And you teach these things that are taught in the general teachings, essentially, to give the instructions on that are found in the general scriptures, in general scriptures. He wouldn't give them meditation instructions that no one else had, instructions on Mahamudra, amazing instructions that no one else could teach. This is not how he did it. And so what some people would say is, and so primarily to teach is the teach as taught generally in the sutras and the tantras. And teach him according to his experience. So to teach in a way that kind of mixed it with his own experience. You wouldn't start talking about the great things like Mahamudra and so forth. He didn't have a way of teaching that. And because of this, then what some people kind of criticized Mikhe Dorje for this. And what they would say is that so when you go to Mikhe Dorje and ask him to teach Mahamudra, a lot of people go to see him and ask for them. But Mikhe Dorje doesn't know how to teach them Mahamudra meditation. He doesn't know how to show people how to meditate. And the reason why he doesn't know how to teach meditation is that Mikhe Dorje never went to a guru who had realized Mahamudra and had never practiced the meditation that you could say determines the view, establishes the view. In brief, he didn't go to a Lama who practices Mahamudra and didn't do the meditation practice, and for that reason, he doesn't know how to teach Mahamudra. And like with his experience and realization, if there's someone who has Mahamudra, then you can really talk about the talk very precisely in terms of your experience and give very direct instructions according to your own experience. But Mikyo Dorje didn't have some experience, so he couldn't teach precise meditation instructions. And so because he didn't teach these meditation instructions, there are very few among his students. So good, sort of great realized meditators who can touch rocks and break them in half. There aren't any who can split the earth by just touching. There aren't any such realized meditators. There aren't many like that. And the reason why that is that Mikyo Dorje himself doesn't have really much of any practice of Mahamudra. Because he doesn't have any Mahamudra practice, he can't teach it to anyone else. And so for that reason, he doesn't have many students who've developed the realization of Mahamudra. And this is what, there are many people who criticized him in such a way. But there's the Bhikshu Sanjay Paldrip, the author of the commentary on the autobiographical versus good deeds. What he says is that from one perspective, what you're saying is true. You think that Mikyo Dorje should do what other lamas say. Actually, forget about the actual. Mikyo Dorje himself says that there are people who don't have the capacity even to develop the preparations for dhyana. But there are people who, but many gurus think that still teach them Mahamudra and Dzogchen and other great practices. And you think that Mikyo Dorje should do the same thing. But Mikyo Dorje doesn't do as you wish. He doesn't teach people who lack the capacity to, he doesn't give them the instructions on Mahamudra. He doesn't teach about Mahamudra view, or he doesn't give the instructions on Mahamudra to such people. If he had, there wouldn't be any need to do so. For example, you could call a beggar by the name of king. You could call a beggar a king, but who's going to think that the beggar is a king? Just merely having the name. If you give him the nickname king, then it's something that everyone's going to laugh to. Everyone's going to think it's strange. But no one's going to think that that beggar is a king. So there's no point in calling a beggar or naming a beggar king. There's no point to doing that. So for that, so those who don't have the fortune to be able to develop Mahamudra, so he doesn't teach them Mahamudra, and even if he taught them, there would be no point to doing it, because they don't have the fortune, they don't have the capacity, they don't have all the preparations that they need. They don't have all the preparations for developing Mahamudra. They don't have everything they need to develop Mahamudra meditation. And so it's too early to teach them Mahamudra. Like Sanjay Paldrip himself, what he said is, I can't say whether Mikyo Dorje, I can't say whether he has achieved the actual practice of jhana or not, or higher realization, because I have no way of knowing whether he has achieved the actual practice of jhana, because I don't have the experience of achieving jhana, and I don't know what it's like. So I can't say whether Mikyo Dorje has achieved the actual practices of jhana or not. Some people say that if you've achieved the actual practices of the jhanas, then you would be able to produce miracles and clairvoyances. But I've never seen any signs of Mikyo Dorje having such miracles or clairvoyances. But for those who desire liberation omniscience, I know that he is someone that he is able to teach them the methods for developing them, the methods of Jhana and Prajna for developing those. I'm certain of this, and the reason why I have certainty in this is that no matter what method of the Jhana of the Mahayana teaches, is that all of the methods of the Mahayana are taught for the sake of achieving Buddhahood. The main aim is to bring all sentient beings to the state of Buddhahood. And so he only teaches the focus on that focus of achieving Buddhahood. And so so in order to achieve Buddhahood, you have to have that focus on bringing all sentient beings to achieve Buddhahood. That is the focus you should have on all Mahayana Dharma. So whatever Mikyo Dorje taught, no matter what Dharma he was teaching, he only taught and able to bring all sentient beings to Buddhahood. And it's very clear that this is all headed. Likewise, Mikyo Dorje was very well versed in the stages of the path to achieve Buddhahood and omniscience. And it's like he was always thinking about this. And so for this reason, and so I think it's definitely so, that Mikyo Dorje was something who could teach the stages of the path to achieve liberation and omniscience. So I have certainty in that. So that's the discussion of dhyana. Now, after dhyana, if we go by order, the next one should be prajna. Prajna is the sixth of the six transcendences. But prajna was already taught above during the verse on ultimate bodhicitta, so it's not specifically taught here. So prajna is not specifically mentioned here. So after that, what is next is the second outline, shall we say, the second point is, in terms of how he trained in the precepts, there's a second of the subtopics of that. The first was the training, the six transcendences, and then after we've already finished that one, the second is then how Mikyo Dorje trained in purifying his own continuum. Now, the root text for this is, as long as you hang on to your intractable character, you will not tame the mind streams of your followers. So I focused on my own accumulation and purification to increase the accumulation and purification among my students. I think of this as one of my good deeds. Now, among the 33 good deeds, this is the 27th. Now, if we discuss this according to how it's talked about in Mikyo Dorje's instructions and training and his liberation story, the practice of dhyana, or the meditation or yoga practice, for it to progress along the path to great enlightenment, depends primarily upon it depends on seeing your own and others' faults as being faults. You need to recognize faults as faults. And once you recognize that a fault is a fault, then you need to uproot the fault or eradicate it completely. And you need to strive hard at that. You should also then so you should seek to see whether the gurus whom you follow have the ability to protect you. If they have the qualities to protect you. If they do have the qualities, what are the qualities that make them able? If they lack them, why are they unable to protect you? What are the faults they have? When you recognize what a fault is, then you need to recognize what your own faults and qualities are. Then you can see if you need to benefit other sentient beings, then you need to say, what do you need to do about the faults? What do you need to eliminate? And what are the qualities that you need to develop? So you have to understand this. And And in order so that the virtue that you and others have accumulated, so that they don't in the interim become wasted, you need to dedicate them and rejoice in them. And also purify themselves. And you should also, in this respect, you should also like to pay attention to this. So you always need to be on the lookout to see whether you're doing this or not. So as I described above, merely having jhana is not enough. In order for the jhana to become a cause of great enlightenment, you need to recognize what is going to benefit yourself. And you need to do everything you can to decrease the qualities you already had, and do everything you can to increase the qualities that you had not previously had. And with the roots of virtue you have, you need to see whatever you can do to make them more powerful and stronger. And so that the results of that can ripen invisibly. That means in this very lifetime. And so you need to work on hard, you need to have the thoughts and actions to accomplish this. And you need to be diligent about such thoughts and actions. And if you're going to engage in such thoughts and actions, then you need to, you shouldn't get a little bit proud of it. You shouldn't get conceited about having a few qualities. If you have just a few qualities, if you get proud about them or conceited about them, then what happens is then you have like the great Mara of satisfaction. And if you're caught up by the great Mara of satisfaction, then that will prevent you from developing the qualities of the higher paths and levels. So for that reason, you need to always be examining the faults in your own being and evaluating the qualities you have in your own being. So this is very important. So if we discuss this verse, how it's talked about in Sanjay Peldrup's commentary, these days, that means, it can mean like our current day, but also means during the time of Mikhail Dorj, it's the same. Whether we talk about how people are serving the three jewels or trying to bring defenseless sentient beings and to protect them and to bring them to happiness, whichever respect you're thinking about it, there are many people who said that they're unrivaled, that they're really great. And so whether these are a guru or whether an ordinary being, there are quite a few people like this, but in actuality, what such gurus do is that in order to teach that if you're going to bring people to virtue, first you need to be able to recognize its opposite, which is non-virtue, but they're unable to do this. They have people practice virtue and they get a lot of people to accumulate the virtues. And they say, oh, I'm getting people to practice, accumulate merit and do virtue, but what these gurus actually do is, because they don't recognize the opposite of virtue, they aren't able to identify it clearly. And because the reason why the sign or reason of their not being able to do this is that they say that they're getting other people to do virtues. They say this verbally, but when people have faith in them or pay them respects, they get them to do unvirtuous things. They encourage them to do unvirtuous actions. And the reason why they do this is because they themselves are unable to recognize that unvirtuous behavior is unvirtuous. And because they're unable to recognize this, they have these students, the people who have faith in them, accumulate unvirtuous actions. And this primarily is because they do not see what non-virtue is. For someone like Miki Dorje, what he would do is if you try to, if you don't, without taming your own passion, if you say then you're taming others, if you are kind of boast about doing this or pretend to be doing this, if you're unable to think about anything longer than the very shortest of terms, if you can't even think about, if you don't know how to think about the sake of future lives, if you're only thinking about the pleasures of this lifetime, and so there are many people who think like this, and they seem to benefit others people, but the way they're acting is like teaching a leper is doing a Garuda practice. Like there's leprosy, right? Now this is a Naga disease, actually. Now the antidote for Naga is a Garuda. So we have many Garuda practices, right? And so these are said to be antidotes to Naga illnesses. But for someone who has leprosy, is practicing Garuda practice is like very laughable. Because if you actually know the Garuda practice, then how is it that you would have been caught leprosy? First, before you do the Garuda practice, you should cure yourself of leprosy, and you can't teach other people. If you teach other people to do Garuda practice and tell them this, then it's quite laughable that you would say this if you can't even do it yourself. It's the same. And so these are just ways to exhaust yourself. They're pointless things to do. If you're saying that you're working for others' sake without seeking, I think this is just being overly bold. In actuality, it's a very laughable way of speaking. So this is what he said. So I think that's probably the best place to leave it tonight, because I'm not feeling the best tonight. A little bit strange, so let's leave it there for now. It's best to leave it there for tonight. And so we will continue at the next session.